Oi, lads. Okay. Black cards from Phyrexia, all will be won. Let's have a look. Drevnod Carnage Dominus. 8-3 for 5. Insanely weird stats. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers initial time. And importantly, for 4 life but 0 mana, you can exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard. You can put an indestructible counter on Drevnod. That's pretty cool. It is a 5 mana legendary creature. How do you use this, homie? In decks where things dying does a thing. I was thinking it could be good in Esper Legends, because you have things which die, which do things, right? Which I've thought about before, but now that I'm here, I've forgotten what they are. Rata Drabic. That makes things happen when things die. What else? Elas Ilkor makes things happen when things die. So yeah, it could be nice in Esper Legends. And also another thing that would make it decent in Esper Legends is that you'll be pretty good in that deck. Oh yeah, there's the backside of Denic too. But Esper Legends is pretty good at getting 3 creature cards in the graveyard, right? Because you have Rafine to put a ton of creatures into your graveyard where your Rafine triggers. And your deck is obviously very aggressive, so there should be a ton of matchups where you can afford to pay the 4 life to just get that immediate indestructible. So the competitor for Drevnod and Esper Legends for 5 mana is AO. AO itself has a triggered ability on death, so maybe like if you're playing like 3 AOs or something right now, maybe you could swap that to 1 AO and 2 of this, or 2 AO and 1 of this. Maybe just one Drevnod, because you are going to be able to get the indestructible counter pretty easily. That second copy could end up being a bit stuck in your hand. But I can see this in Esper Legends, man. I don't know. I can't really think of any other deck that would want it, but Esper Legends is already one of the best decks in Standard, and you're getting Skrelv as an upgrade, maybe Drevnod's an upgrade, so it's going to get even better. But I think this is a playable card. I think it's a playable card just because Esper Legends exists. Phyrexian Obliterator. I need to take a sip of water before I say this. Trash. Vraska. Draw 6 mana or 5 for 6 loyalty or 4. Draw a card and lose 1 life, proliferate. Right, fine, I can hear you all screaming like, oh my god, Obliterator is so broken. Think of what I can do. I can play Obliterator, and then next turn I can use a fight spell on my opponent's creature, and I can force them to deal damage to Obliterator, and then I can force them to sacrifice many permanents. There's only one problem with that, my friend. You can't do that, because the Phyrexian Obliterator is in your hand. It's not on the battlefield, because you can't cast it, because it's 4 black, and you can't cast 4 black in any deck for 4, because there is no deck that plays a black source every turn. Boom, 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 boom. Even mono black can't cast this card, because much like the white one, you got to play either the creature land if you're playing an aggro deck, or some sort of other land. This competes with She Aldred. You might have heard of her. In the mana cost, there is no way that you would ever cut She Aldred to cut even a single copy of She Aldred to play a single copy of Obliterator. You're not going to cut all your Shellies to play all your Obliterators. You're not going to add more 4-drops to your deck because you're just making it slower. And the only way to play both without making your deck slower would be to cut a card that costs more mana. So in that case, you're cutting Invoke Despair. And guess what? You ain't cutting Invoke Despair to play Obliterator either. So there's not only no deck that would ever put this in the deck, there's no deck that can ever cast this spell. So that is the more long-winded way to say trash. But I'm an experienced content creator, okay? I'm able to convey massively detailed answers and evaluations on cards using a single word. Trash. Vraska, Betrayal's Sting. 6 mana, 6 loyalty, 5 mana, 4 loyalty. You draw a card, you lose 1 life, proliferate. Target creature becomes a treasure artifact with sacrifice this artifact. I don't want anyone, and loses all card types and abilities. If a player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. Okay, I want you to get into the mindset of a Magic the Gathering card evaluator. How do you evaluate a card? It's really easy. It's especially easy for the expensive cards like this. All you have to do is go to standard. Like, you need a notepad and a pen. Just go on the standard ladder, play a few games, and take a note of any time an opponent plays a card that costs the same amount of mana as a card that you want to evaluate. So we want to evaluate Vraska. Let's pretend we're playing some games of standard. We've got our notepad and pen. Our opponent just cast an Invoke Despair. Okay, allow me to note down Invoke Despair. Our opponent's just cast a Gix's Command. Gix's Command. Our opponent has just cast a... I don't know, man. What other 5 mana cards are there? One moment, please. Just a quick scan. Our opponent has just cast an AO. AO. Mightstone, Weakstone. Our opponent has just cast a Mightstone and a Weakstone. Okay, so we've got our notepad, we've got our list. Invoke Despair, Gix's Command, Mightstone, Weakstone, AO. So now we compare our card to this list. If our opponent casts one of the cards in our notepad and we cast a Vraska, who's winning the game? So if our opponent casts an Invoke and we've cast a Vraska, we're losing. If our opponent casts a Gix's Command and we cast a Vraska, we're losing. If our opponent casts an AO and we cast a Vraska, do you know what? We might be winning. Because we minus their AO. Ooh. And if an opponent casts a Mightstone, Weakstone and we cast a Vraska, I would say we're losing. They have drawn 2 cards and ramped. We have drawn 1 card and not ramped. So it's looking like, on balance, we're losing. So that's, I would say that Vraska kind of sucks for that reason. She's not terrible, but she is a little sus. Archfiend of the Dross. 4 mana, 6/6, 4 oil counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter with Archfiend of the Dross. Then if it has no oil counters on it, you lose the game. When a creature an opponent control dies, its controller loses 2 life. So all you need to do is play this on turn 4, hit them 4 times, and then they're dead, right? It's so hard for any 4 mana black card that's not Shelly to be in a deck. How do you be a 4 mana black card and be better than Shelly? Isn't it? It's like impossible. The one thing that this creature has going for it is that it's nice with fight rigging. The problem is that I don't think fight rigging needed 1 more creature. I think it needs 2 more creatures, right? So they have to be 1, 2, 3, or 4 because you have to be able to play your fight rigging on curve and it be effective. So right now we've got Henry and the Kraken. Then you're going to have Henry, Kraken, and the Archfiend. I'm not sure that's enough. And also the creatures have to be decent. I mean, they don't have to be incredible, but they have to be decent if in the games that you don't draw your fight rigging. Now, the Henry and the Kraken are both decent, and I guess that this one is also... I mean, it's not great. Let's not lie. It's not a good creature. But at least you can, you know, you can cast it in a game that you don't have fight rigging. You're not going to break down into tears in those games, but, you know, it's going to be close. Maybe just a 3rd creature is enough to play fight rigging, but I doubt that. But I love fight rigging. I'll give it a try. Black Sun's Twilight. Up to 1 target creature gets -6/-6 until end of turn. Effects is 5 or more. Return a creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. The more I see this card, the more I read it, the more I think it's just terrible. I was thinking of playing it as a 1-of or something in Sultai, maybe, a deck like that, you know, like kind of grindy mid-range deck with that's going to have some big creatures in it just without taking any deck building hits, you know? Like, yeah, you can play this in Grixis and then randomly add an expensive creature into your deck for no reason, but Sultai at least does it more reasonably where you were going to play those creatures anyway. But even in a deck like Sultai, it's just so much mana. It's a 2-for-1 if you get a creature back. And to be honest, the best use that I can think for this is like Harvester. You know, Harvester killed their creature with your Harvester, and then use this on turn 3 to kill their next creature, get your Harvester back. Like, that's kind of okay, but only if they play 2 creatures in a row that have 2 toughness or less, which, while that is going to happen sometimes, if you've got nothing else to do, if they don't do that, you're just a bit screwed, aren't you? Oh, you don't even get the Harvester back. That's what I mean. The more I read it, the more I think it's bad. I'm trying to think of something that you can do where it's good other than just, you know, I have found myself in a situation where I've got 20 mana, my opponent has just cast a Gigantosaurus, I remove their Gigantosaurus and bring my Ulamog back from the graveyard. You know, in theoretical games of Magic, in your own mind, this card's the best card in your deck, obviously. But in a real game of Magic, it's the worst card in your deck, unfortunately. Gith, Thane of Contracts is a 3-mana 3/4, where other creatures you control get -1/-1. And then, for 3 and a tap, you reanimate a creature. This is a very interesting card. So 3-mana creatures with no ETB need to be either extremely hard to kill or game winning if they don't die. So extremely hard to kill example, you know, like Graveyard Trespasser. Your opponent is they're in tears every time they try and kill your Trespasser. They get so mad. You know, that's Trespasser is pretty good. Or game winning if they don't die. Does Geth win the game if it doesn't die? Maybe. 3-mana reanimate is no joke when it's attached to a 3/4 body. No joke indeed. The issue is you can't really play any 2-mana creatures because you can't make your 2-mana creature smaller because it's already small enough. So you cannot play it in a Thalia deck, for example. You cannot play it in... Maybe you can play it in a Harvester deck. I mean, you might have to play it in a Harvester deck, right? Because you need to get your creature into the graveyard somehow too, and the Harvester Blood Token will help with that. What other like really prominent 2-mana creatures are there? And are they good with Geth, or are they not good with Geth? It's hard to say. It is an interesting card though. One that I will be trying. Probably the hardest card to evaluate so far, I would say. Just because you need to know the stats of every playable 2-mana creature in the game to evaluate this card, and that is beyond the scope of this review. Kinzu of the Bleak Coven. This is just a rat tribal card we skip. When a non-token creature dies, pay 2 life, make a token. Nope. Phyrexia Arena. It's a terrible card. Unfortunately, there are no 3-mana cards in the game that are played in Standard right now that your opponent could possibly cast against you, where you can respond by then playing a Phyrexia Arena on your turn 3. Even if they play a value card, you know, like Wedding Announcement or Corpse Appraiser or something, even if they play their value card, you're still going to get blitzed. Now, if they play their tempo card like Fable or Rafine or something, you're going to get mega blitzed. So I just don't see how you can ever use this. Vran, Executioner Thane. 2-mana 2/2 when one or more creatures dies. When one or more creatures you control die, opponent, you drain for 2. Once per turn. Okay, once per turn clause, cringe as always. Other creatures clause, also cringe. It is a legendary. Maybe you squeeze it into Esper Legends. It's probably better in Esper Legends than your 4th copy of Elasil Core, just because of the legend rule. Don't think you're going to play this in a random, like, mono black deck with some creatures and some non-creatures. Don't think you're going to play it in any mid-range decks. Are you going to play it in Anvil? I mean, maybe. The problem with playing it in Anvil is that there's just not really any space for a card like this, man. Once you've got your lands, once you've got your anvils, once you've got your removal spells, once you've got your harvesters, once you've got your fables, once you've got your shellies, once you've got your card draw artifacts, there's no space in the deck. So the only way to play Vran, the only way to get space in Anvil for this card is you've got to cut Shelly or Fable or Harvester. You can't cut removal, you can't cut your card draw, you can't cut your anvil, you can't cut your lands. Is this better than Shelley? In anvil? Maybe. But I doubt it. Is it better than Fable? No. Is it better than Harvester? No. So maybe you can play this instead of Shelley in specifically Anvil, and maybe you can find a slot for this in Esper Legends. It's a decent card, but it's not spectacular. You would only be playing it in Esper Legends just to not play 4 copies of a legendary creature, and maybe in Anvil you can make the use out of the drain better than you can in this card and better than you can in Shelley, but we'll see. Ambulatory Edifice. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. When you do, creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. That's 3 mana. Man, make this thing 2 mana and let me go off. Bilious Skull Dweller. 1/1 Death Touch Toxic 1. Random creature. Sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. -4/-4 until end of turn, proliferate. -4/-4 kills most things, but not everything, so you can't play it. Feed the Infection, you draw 3 cards and you lose 3 life. If you've got Corrupted, each opponent who has 3, but yeah, loses 3 life, whatever. 2 mana, enchant your creature, Toxic 2, when it dies, return it. 4 mana, 2/2, when a creature or artifact is put into a graveyard, put an oil counter. So this thing is kind of 4 mana Corvold that doesn't draw any cards, right? That seems pretty bad. I like the cards. Nimraiser Paladin. When it enters the battlefield, return creature or card with mana value 3 or less from graveyard to battlefield. Oh, from graveyard to hand. Okay, trash. I think if it was graveyard to battlefield, it wouldn't be the worst, right? When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice a creature unless an opponent has blah 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 blah. Whenever you proliferate, drain 2. Just a 1/3, man. Stats are so bad. Sheoldred's Edict. This is a good card. It's a decent removal spell. It'll see a lot of play, but at the end of the day, it's just a removal spell, isn't it? There's not too much to say on it other than it's good and you'll be crafting it. Vat Emergence. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Proliferate. 1 mana artifact. Okay, so these can be good. Always read 1 mana artifacts carefully. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter. 3 mana, remove 4 oil counters, return creature. So it's a 1 mana artifact. Once 4 of your creatures dies, you can reanimate 1 for 3. Seems very scuffed. Annihilating Glare. Pay 4 or sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy creature or planeswalker. We get those cards a lot. Maybe a 1 of an Anvil or something. We'll see. Anvil type decks are the only place you ever see cards like this. Anoint with Affliction. Exile target creature if it has mana value 3 or less. Yeah, it's good with blood tokens. But there's just not enough blood tokens in standard other than Harvester, right? You're not gonna play this in a random Harvester deck, but maybe Anvil though. Anoint with Affliction. Exile target creature if it has mana value 3 or less. Exile that creature instead if its controller has 3 or more poison counters. 2 mana instant, exile mana value 3 or less. I don't really see the point in playing this over the Edict or go for the throw or cut down or whatever. This card seems fine, but it just seems the worst option of those 4. So I sleep. Blight Belly Rat. 2/2 dies proliferate. As long as opponent has 3 or more poison counters, death touch and lifelink. Nope, nope, nope. 6 mana 5/5 ETB, opponent discards a card or you gain 4 life. Duress, classic. When was the last time there was a standard without Duress? There's a trivia question for you. 2 mana 2/2 for 3, return it back to the battlefield tapped. Gulping Scrap Trap. When it enters the battlefield or dies, proliferate. Infectious Inquiry. 3 mana, draw 2, lose 2 life. Poison counter. Death Touch Indestructible. Flyer, Menace. -1/-1. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, proliferate. Okay. Well, maybe I'm misremembering, but black seems like the best colour so far. Okay, I'm scrolling. I definitely misremembered. Black has actually no good cards. It depends how you define good cards. Right, Drivnod, I would say, is a playable 1 or 2 of in one deck. Archfiend of the Dross is a playable card in a bad deck. Geth, we'll see. Vran is, let's call him maybe playable in 2 decks. Edict is just a removal spell, nobody cares. Okay, so there are a few playable black cards in a few decks. I wouldn't say anything too crazy though. Certainly I would like to take back my original statement where I said that black seems like the best colour so far. It seems equally mid as the other two.
Ecuador! Ecuador!